All right, welcome everyone. Exciting day today as we talk about the release that was 24.11 that went into Unified Insights that is now called Analytics and Insights over the weekend. Let me start with my disclaimer that I always say that during this demonstration, this is to be used for training purposes only, that we are never sharing any real students' data or information. This is a sandbox server full of fake students, fake data, so any likeness to anyone is purely coincidental. So we are going to go through, and when I say this is packed, y'all, I have 42 slides of updates. But these have been some things that y'all have very much been asking for that PowerSchool has been working on. So I'm going to give them the props. They have been working very hard in the background. This is not all of it. There is more to come. So just keep abreast of the newsletter. I will email every time out these big updates come through. And we will kick this off and get started. So what I'm going to do is get this in chunks. We're going to look at the dashboards first. We're going to look at what changed in interventions, and then we will take a look at the student plans. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to enter them into the chat, and we will answer them as we go. So let's get us kicked off with our review. First up, what all has changed in the actual dashboards. So as you have logged in to Unified Insights, if you've been in this morning and your default landing page is that overview screen, we do have one of the attendance metrics on there that have actually been updated. So our first feature enhancement is what I'm going to call a variation piece inside of here. When you are looking at the attendance metrics across the performance indicators, the attendance overview, risk analysis, which we haven't turned on yet, but is coming, classroom or student profile dashboards, the following four metrics now display a percent change compared to the previous periods or prior year. So the four metrics that we look at, and you really see them when you look at the attendance overview dashboard, absent in the last 5 days. You'll now see what I call the variation metric. It will tell you compared to the previous 5 days period, whether it has gone up or it has gone down. For absence yesterday, it'll compare it to those who were then absent 2 days ago. So it's yesterday's yesterday. So it looks at that same kind of point in time reference and lets you know how the data has changed, because one of the things a lot of people have asked for, or how do we know if our data is getting better? What, like, do we have a variation metric? And now we do on these. And if we're doing it in attendance, I have a feeling maybe they'll start to look at it in other areas of the product as well. So we'll be stay tuned on that. Now, not only does this variation show on these individual dashboards, but remember our dashboards are drillable. So if you were to take any one of these metrics and dial into them to actually get to the student list, so that you are maybe looking at the list of kids who were absent in the last 5 days. If you scroll all the way over to the right, they actually give you a column of the last 6 to 10 days. So it gives you that variation column as well. So now you can see the ADA for the last 5 days, and then the ADA for the last 6 to 10 days, because maybe they had a really bad 5 to 10 or 6 to 10 days, but they've gotten better in the last 5 days because you put them on an attendance plan or something like that. So looking at variation is one of our first enhancements that we have seen. Our next enhancement is something called the limit by value drill down option. So we're all very familiar with this right here, and that we have these bars or dots or metrics inside of there. So whenever you are on any of these metrics, if you have drillable access, you always know you can drill into those kids. Well, in 3 of the dashboards, in the behavior, the overall, or actually any of the analysis dashboards and behavior, in the enrollment admissions dashboard and the enrollment withdrawal dashboards, they now give you an option on any of those metrics that if you right click, you can limit by this value. The wording is kind of odd on it, but here is what I would say that it is. It's saying, hey, if I'm looking at these 146 kids, So I've got this metric right here. This is offense analysis. It says I have 146 kids at this Maple Middle School. What if I want to use that as a student group without creating a group and look at it across the dashboards? So you know how you can filter your dashboards to look at different grade level or students or groups? This allows you to drill and limit all of your dashboards to these kids in the metric. So whether it be a dot or whether it be a bar, it'd say, hey, make this 146 the kids that I'm looking at across my dashboards. It's like setting your current filter. So you'll start to see that on these 3 subsets of dashboards. Again, you are able to see this by right clicking on any of the metrics of these 3 dashboards. This one is more of a, it didn't make sense what they were displaying, so they fixed it. Inside of the student profile academics, any of the academic details, the academic summary, when it's listing the years and terms and schools and grades, if you remember under this term column, it used to show zeros, ones, and twos. And even in prior training that we did, we kind of had to explain that that's how PowerSchool looks at the years and terms set up inside of SIS, whether it was the originating year or term 1 or term 2. And it really didn't make sense to people, especially if somebody created years and terms out of order, which can be done, not recommended, but can be done. It would get confusing. Well, they finally updated that so that this right here now just actually says the exact term name instead of that back coded 0, 1, and 2 information that was in there. So now on those screens, you should see the actual term of your school displayed. So very few updates to the overall analytics dashboards, just some very, very minor things, but things that people have been asking for. So now to the good stuff. So I hope y'all are all sitting down because this is where we're going to have fun. Let's talk about interventions because that is a hot and heavy topic across the state and what we're doing. And I will say, seeing some fabulous work by each of y'all in the district. So kudos to what y'all are doing with the kids and doing in your interventions with PST. So I'm going to go into interventions. So the first thing is easier visibility into some of your interventions, because especially if you are like the lead person over the interventions, you might have a very long list of interventions on your screen. So 2 things that they have done. 1, you can now pin interventions. So if you are looking at your intervention page within your district or in your school and you have a long laundry list, maybe you have 100 interventions that you're working with. I've seen that in some districts. You can now pin interventions. There'll be a little pin over to the right side of the screen where you can bump it to the top of the page of the intervention. So if you know you're working on data for these 3 interventions, you can pin them and you don't have to keep scrolling through the list to go find them. You'll see them listed right above the area that says today's interventions, which is what flips on any intervention that has a date that falls in the current date. Another feature that they have, it's very small feature, but could help. For a person who has many interventions in there, sometimes you don't realize which one is a new one that has been assigned to you. So now if you are a staff member and you log into your all interventions on this screen right here, if you have been assigned a new intervention that you have not yet opened, you'll see a little blue bar just like this right here over to the left-hand side of that intervention name. Now, once you log in and go into that intervention and start interacting with it, that blue bar will go away. That's just an indicator to go, hey, you've got a new one, so that you know that you need to interact with it. And just like it says, once opening, the mark is removed. Very tiny mark, but you'll see it over on the left-hand side of that whole line of interventions. So the first one is just a visibility thing. Sometimes little things are big things. Moving on to the next one. Role-based restrictions. This was actually brought up to us by a district that the MTSS intervention browser role was not working appropriately. We had learned from some districts that those who had been assigned the browser role that should just be able to view The setup of these interventions, we're actually able to edit the interventions, and that was not intended. So this has now been restricted so that anybody who has the MTSS Interventions browser, now remember, these checkboxes are on user roles over in the SIS that you are assigning your users, but anybody who has that checkbox now cannot create an intervention, edit, or see the templates, and cannot access these settings right here. So they would be able to see this screen, but all of this would be grayed out, so they couldn't adjust students in there, they couldn't adjust the schedule in there or anything like that. So if you have somebody that you truly wanted to be a browser only, this will now work for them. All right, here's a big one that you asked for. Printing the intervention reports for multiple students. So we all know about the print student report that became available in interventions a few months ago. Everybody was very excited about that because it does print out a very nice report to send home to parents. Well, one of the asks was, how do we print that for multiple students at one time? I literally just had an email a couple weeks ago from a district asking, and so I was super excited to see this one on the actual release for this month. And there's a couple of ways to do this. These next two slides are going to show two different ways. So first, when you're on your intervention, so if you were to click in your intervention, like inside of this top box right here, you'll notice in the top right-hand corner, there is now a print intervention button. When you click that button, it will bring up your list or your drop down with a list of students where you can click which students you want to actually print this intervention for. Now, I will say this, notice there is not a select all on here. You have to be purposeful with it in who you want to select, and you can select as many as you want in this one. Once you select your students, you then go through and you select which goals you want to print, and you will then be able to print, preview, and print out those reports. Now, this report looks slightly different from the report that you print actually out of the student's overview box that I'm going to show in a minute inside of the intervention. It doesn't do all of those specific attendance detail dates. It gives the attendance gauge for each individual student, but doesn't list the dates. So you might want to play with how that one looks to see if you want to use that bulk functionality, or the second place that they put the bulk functionality is actually on the bulk options here. So remember, when you're looking at your interventions in that overview page down at the bottom, you have all of your blocks of the individual students that you interact with, where you take attendance, where you put the goals, where you put the observations. Well, now when you are in the student overview, you can choose, you can click each of the students that you want, and in bulk options, you now have a print a report. I need you to look at this statement right here, though. They have limited this to 10 at a time that you can choose and print because it pulls so much data. It will then give you all of the other options that you're used to printing. Do you want the notes, the public notes, the private notes? Do you want the dates or not on there? So you have two different ways of now bulk pulling those reports from the interventions to be able to use at PST meetings, to send home with your parents, to send them home or progress reports. However you choose to use those, you now have those two different ways of doing the bulk print. All right, our next feature inside of the interventions is we now have a new student search feature inside of Manage Interventions. So again, when you're in that overall same page I was showing back here, what I call the inside of the very much the interventions page, I'm going to zoom into this area here, and you're looking at this. So remember, once you enroll all of the kids into your intervention, you can always get that list back of the students by clicking on this blue hyperlinked enrolled students, and it will show you all of the students here. Remember, this is how we all had to go in at the end of summer and close out and get our kids out of the interventions and finish them. Well, if you have an intervention that has 100 kids in it, which could be like if it's one of your big summer interventions or something, you want to be able to quickly search for a student. Maybe there's one student that you know has withdrawn from school and you need to withdraw them out of the intervention because you don't want to ride them on through. Well, you would have to scroll through and find them. Well, now you don't have to do that. There is now a search student box at the top of that page where you can start typing in the student name or the student number so that it will then filter this page to find that student for you, and you can quickly update the status on this student if you need to. So search student now available on the manage intervention screen. This one's a big one. The MTSS interventions scheduling assistant. So remember the issues that we had last summer when, or well, even this year, we had to go in and we put our 2 weeks of data in, but then everybody had to go manually get rid of the weekends. And y'all were asking Stacy, why is it? Can we not just have it not do the weekends? Ta-da, now you can do that. So if you have an intervention where it doesn't need the weekends, or maybe it's an intervention that only meets on Mondays and Wednesdays and you need to schedule it just for Mondays and Wednesdays, you can now put a start date, an end date, and then select which days of the week it needs to populate this for. So you will add this information here, and when you hit update calendar, it puts this information over here. Now, remember the other issue that we had with interventions that we learned last year? What happens if you accidentally put the wrong end date or start date on there and you start it? It could not go back. Well, guess what? Yes, Ashley, now you can fix these dates after you've started. So if you put the wrong end date by choice or you needed to go back and edit them at some time, you now can. That was a huge pain point because I know quite a few districts had to restart interventions because of that date. So like we said, sometimes the little things are big things. So this scheduling assistant, I think, should really help you in actually getting your next set of interventions scheduled appropriately without having to then go in and manually manipulate all of those meeting dates. So that was a win for sure. But are you ready for the biggest win inside of interventions? It's that thing that y'all have been asking for the longest. You can now attach documents. It finally came. They said they were working on it and it is here. So let me show you where it's at inside of there. And again, I put all of the notes on this one from the actual release notes because it's more than just like PDFs. It's all kinds of supported files. You can do images, you can do spreadsheets, you can do videos. Like seriously, if you have a little kid that you just need to video them doing something and add it in here to show, that is huge. So file update, this supported types, many more. Where are they housed? They're in the notes area. So you would have to go in and it's just like you are adding in notes to a student. When you are on that notes screen and you'll be able to select a student here, you'll see the little paperclip icon. You know, that's our universal technology attachment icon. Once you click that attach icon, you will then have this area that you can drag and drop or click to add the files and browse inside of your computer. So that is huge that we now have that in there, and it will show in this little like attachment image inside of there. And there are ways to preview them once you get them in there. So that's the big thing. I would say of all of this, trust me, we're not even close to being finished with me showing you everything that's being updated, but this is the one that you have all been waiting on. The things that we could have done in the past with notes still are there. Image upload was actually already there in notes. Some people took advantage of it, some didn't. The ability to link. So if you do have stuff in Google Drive or things such as that, it's still there for you to be able to, but you can now put the raw files in here. I will say this, somebody's wanting to ask this question. I'm not even going to say what the question is. My tech directors that are on the call, I know what you are asking when it comes to file uploaded and storage. Let me say this, PowerSchool hasn't told me there is one, so we're going to assume there is not one. So for those who know what I'm asking, I'm just not even going to say it on here and talk it into fruition, but you can put whatever you need to in there. Had a couple of questions. Is the paperclip attachment option available for plans such as the script? Not yet, Lord. That should be the next part that they do is attach it on the plans. But we can always put it in here because if they have an intervention, we can use it to store if need to. But from what I've been told, it'll be coming to the plans later, but they got it in the interventions first. Next feature update for the MTSS interventions is that we now have some enhanced filters for the interventions, notes, and attachments, because think about it, we are now going to start loading this thing with lots of notes, lots of attachments, and when you go to the note area, it kind of compiles everything for all students in one area. So if you have 100 kids and you've uploaded 100 documents, you might have to do some searching inside of there. So they have added some filters where you can filter within here the notes and or attachments on the students that they are linked to, or whatever date range. Maybe you need to look at all attachments that were entered between a certain week or month period. You can filter by the dates up here, or you can up here, these enrolled students, you can select a specific student to only look at their notes. So when you first come into this area, as you start loading in notes and attachments, you'll see a list of everything that you've added. If you're in the notes area, it looks like this. If you're in the attachments, so if you notice there's like 2 tabs, they're not really defined, but they're up there. If you're on the attachments, they look like this, but it's the same thing. So here's the exact same update that I did, or attachment that I did, looking at it through both lenses. You can filter for just that one student that it was attached to so that you can find it quickly if you needed to. And if you're in the attachments area, such as here, you'll notice this little icon is the square with the, I call it the flyout menu. This is a preview button. So if you don't want to have to download and view it, if you just need to preview it, look at it from the attachments area and click this icon right here, and it'll just pop out whatever that file is in a separate tab, so you don't lose your place in the actual interventions window. Another very good add-on is that we have notes access from the observation tab. So we don't want to always have to go up into that public notes area, go search for a kid, and be able to add those actual notes in. So now when you're on the interventions page and you are in the observations, where we usually mark if they're engaged or neutral or disengaged, you now have an area over here of notes with a little pencil icon. So you can do this kind of in real time on the fly. If you've got your computer there and you're doing whatever intervention you're doing with them and you need to make an observation, you can absolutely do it from this page instead of going into the separate notes area. So even if it has 0, or this one shows I have 5 notes, or 1, it'll take you to the page that I just showed you so that you can quickly and easily add those notes, upload any file that you need to that student document. Another update that we have is a meeting date option in notes. We've never really been able to add a note to an exact meeting day, and now you can if you want to. If you want to say that this note or this document came on this specific meeting intervention date of the student, you can now choose to add it here to that individual meeting date. So here is the add note section. Again, you can make it public or you can make it private. And then you have that attachment with the upload attachment here. So just to show you, let me go back. If you click in this pencil here from this area, this is the screen that comes up. So it's a more condensed view of this screen that you saw here by going to it from the actual notes area at the top right hand corner of your interventions page. So you can do the same thing. Another really cool update that they did with that intervention is they made it seamless to actually go back and forth between the MTSS interventions piece and the actual student profile and analytics. Because maybe you are updating something on the fly inside of there. Now, when you look at your meeting area, so again, we're all familiar with this screen where we have our student overview, attendance, observation, and goals. If you'll notice, the student names, no matter which one of those you're looking on, is now in blue. That means it's a hyperlink. So I can click on the student name from the list in the interventions. It will open up another tab and bring you to the interventions profile page for the overall student profile. And then if you needed to navigate anywhere in here, you've got that profile open. So now you get the best of both worlds inside of there. Instead of having to close out of the intervention altogether, go find the student in the analytics side and bring up that information. You can now jump from the intervention into the student profile in one click. Question, is there any possibility to have the engagement and attendance all on the same page for a meeting date? I don't know about that, Jennifer. I think just in my feeling of that, that's probably going to be a very huge core update. I don't see them doing that. Not saying that they couldn't, but I've not seen that on a roadmap anywhere. Casey, is marking and noting engagement in their intervention and uploading documents a requirement for the SRIP students? That is something that we would have to ask the ARI team. Missy, I don't know if you want to see that question and take it for something to answer later on. I'm not sure about that one. All right, another enhancement that we've seen on the MTSS interventions is an improved meeting date selection. So you know how when you would first go into interventions, the date that it would start on would not always be a date that was beneficial to you, and you're like, why can't it just default to today's date? Now it does. So when you click into an intervention, the selected meeting date actually pulls the current date, and if it's not the current date, so let's say that today is not an in-session day for your school, then it's going to pull the most recent date of your school days. So it makes it just a little bit easier for you to have the right date in there to make sure you are checking your attendance, doing the observations, or the goals for your students. Another update in the MTSS interventions area is improved visibility of interventions that are actually linked to the intervention plans. So this is going to be very helpful to our districts, to my state users on the call. We don't see this yet. Fingers crossed we're going to get it, but the districts, you do see this. So when you are looking at the intervention bank, you're able to see how many times an actual intervention has been used. We've all seen these counts of numbers when you look at the intervention bank. Well, now that number is hyperlinked where if you click on this number, so if this summer camp has been used 3 times, I can see exactly who created it inside of here. So it just gives you a little more detail about it, because we have had some people that said, hey, we saw that this was created more times than it should have been, and I'm trying to figure out who created them. Well, now you kind of have that stamp of who the intervention owner, the one who originated that intervention, was. Another update is a student status filter has been added. So when you are on this selected meeting group, we know that it is a little bit of a pain point that if you have a lot of kids enrolled in an intervention. Now, it's not as hard when you have 5, 10 kids in there, but if you're looking at a list of 100 kids and you need to work with a certain group of them, because maybe you have 100 kids enrolled into the intervention, but you're only working with 10 of them today in your small group. Well, we want some way to be able to filter and just work with certain kids. We started that migration. So the first thing they did is they've given us a filter status up here where we can filter for enrolled, withdrawn, or completed students. So especially if you have withdrawn kids out and you don't need them to be in the list while you're marking attendance or you're doing things, you can filter for just the enrolled kids. The ask has been made to PowerSchool to put the My Groups as a filter in there so that you could filter by your group. So I'm hoping that we see that soon, because that's going to be a win that's about as big as the attachments are in this program. But for now, we do have the filter status where we can filter for just those who are enrolled, just who's withdrawn, or anybody that you have marked completed at this time. One of the issues that has been reported, and lots of you saw it, and I actually have had it on the newsletter for the past, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. We've had that issue when you go to print a report, that it would give you dates on Sundays and not have Mondays or Fridays. That issue has been corrected. So your reports will now print with the correct dates on there if you were one of the districts who were seeing that issue with the report. So Good fix on that. And just FYI, it was because the server was based in India, which was a day difference on our report. So they got that fixed. They've also added, so I've got 2 updates on this one. They have added a target score line to your goals. So we've set goals and y'all have marked your progress monitoring as you've gone with goals, but we've never seen, other than what the target is up here, kind of where the trend line is. Well, now for all of the goals, whatever the target goal is, it will be denoted as a dotted line, so that as you're putting your progress monitoring in, you can see where you are relative to that overall target goal inside of there. So that was a nice little addition for those of you who are really wanting to look at the analytics inside of that. Another fix was in the date range selection in interventions. I don't know if any of y'all actually saw this. I've heard from just a couple of districts, but I didn't hear from everybody, that there were certain ones that when they went to look at a date range in the actual intervention dashboards, it would not let them go backwards to dates in last school year. Well, sometimes we need to see what we did last spring or last summer or things such as that. Well, this is now fixed. So if you were ever seeing an issue where you couldn't change a date range to something back in a prior school year that was causing you issue, this is now fixed in that actual intervention dashboard. Another fix or an addition inside of that intervention dashboard is going to be inside of the school location. There is now a school column that has been added to the intervention student list on the dashboard. And I'm just going to say this. This was actually a customization we had put in for us in Alabama because we're a state model and needed to know what school they were at. Well, they now have applied that to the core product, so everybody who uses analytics and insights can now see what school those students are in, because that helps as even a district user, not just as a state user. Just checking the comments that are in there. And Misty, thank you for jumping in and answering those in ARI. Much appreciated. Couple of analytics that have had just feature and bug fixes, just kind of the FYI y'all on these. Improvement in discipline data accuracy. There was some bugs that they found in the way that in multi-district clients, which is what we are as a state user, that the suspension percentages would sometimes calculate incorrectly because of how it was joining different districts together. You didn't see it on your level as a district. We might see it here as the state, but they have now corrected that. There is a new flag location inside of the behavior part of the analytics where it now can do combined ones. It also is updating the name of everything called offenses to, incidents now to be called offensives. Another one, a grade filter issue that they had fixed for an annualized grade. They were looking at it the wrong way. That has been corrected. And behavior. This actually should have been in my first set of slides, but it got moved to the wrong section. Apologize for that, y'all. And display all incidences or all offenses linked to an incident. So just a couple of issues and behavior fixes in those behavior dashboards. Another thing that we saw inside of there in enrollment, they have enhanced the logic for tracking overall student changes. Most of you have seen the dashboard that says how many students have changed schools. They have now updated it so that it says how many have changed schools in the last 365 days, because it has always looked at only the last school year, but a lot of people didn't realize that. So they updated the name of the metric so that you could see that. They also have corrected the y-axis title of what are the 10 most frequent withdrawal reasons inside of the dashboards. So it's now titled the number of withdrawals. And on to our last section, student plans, because just like we had some very exciting updates for interventions, there are now some exciting updates inside of the student plans module as well. So the first update to student plans is that there are some security changes going to take place. So hold your breath on this one. As much as we have said, all right, we've gotten our security finally figured out, Remember that student plans and dashboard access came from the same place in those user roles. It was all of those UIHN roles in the SIS that you were giving to them. Well, we had requests from lots of districts that we needed the student plans and we needed the dashboards separated out, because maybe I want somebody to have access to dashboards but not have access to student plans. And the way that it was constructed, we were not able to do that, or vice versa. Well, now we're going to be able to separate these out. So for my SIS admins who are on the call, inside of those user roles where you have your check boxes, there are now additional check boxes specifically for student plan access. Now I'm going to say this. We have not disconnected the access you have set up, so your people still have access, but we will eventually cut off the student plan access that we've built through the UIHN roles, and we will default them to these roles right here. So you will need to make sure if you are curriculum, get with your SIS admins so that y'all can go through to see which groups do you need to migrate and check the boxes for these new student plan access versus just the UIHN access. Teachers, again, you do not have to worry about. They have automatically been made a student plan author, but you will need to look at like your school admin and your district admin to move them over to the MTSS district manager or district admin. Keeping in mind that the district manager still cuts at that school level if all the user has is access to the school level. It will work very much like the MTSS interventions breakouts do. Now student plans will as well. So start making a game plan. I will be announcing through the weekly newsletter when the UIHN access will be cut off for student plans, and that will only be reflected to dashboard access. So if in a few weeks somebody yells, hey, I lost all student plan access, it could be that y'all have not checked that box for them. So go ahead and make a game plan for that now. Here's probably the most exciting thing for student plans. You can now create student plans in bulk. Okay, it finally came. So dashboard users who have access to MTSS student plans can select a group of students from a dashboard or from a group, however you have them in there, and bulk create the student plans based on a single plan template, and they will be able to bulk set the following fields. So this will get the plan stood up. As we know, once we get into the plan, so if I have 30 kids I need to create a SRIP for, this will get the plan created for everyone. You still have to go in and do the guts of the plans because each kid is going to have different information there. I did include a workflow in this, and I will have this slide deck right here available with the recording when I send it back out to everyone so that y'all will have these. And we'll actually film a video going through this so that you'll see how to do this as well, and we'll put it on YouTube. So the first thing you would do is if you have your set of students selected, you know how we can check box the kids from any list or from your My Groups, the kids that you want to. Inside of the actions, you will now have the Create Student Plans. Once you hit the Create Student Plan, it will pop up this box to create student plan. The first thing is you're going to select your plan template. So maybe you're doing the PST form, or maybe you're doing the SRIP, or maybe you're doing the Literacy Act portfolio. Whichever plan template, you will collect it or select it from the drop-down list. Step 2 is to create the start date of these plans for each of the students. Step 3, enter your end date. Step 4, add additional staff. Remember that as the user, whoever creates the initial student plan automatically tags as a staff member, but if you need other staff to be able to work with this student plan, you would tag them here. Step 5 is to update the plan name. Now, remember that here in Alabama, we have a very specific name that we want you to call these that also involves the student name. So what is good is that you are able to use different template, what we call these data tags inside of there, so that you can say, hey, when you format these, I want you to call it blah, blah, PST, blah, blah, student name. We're able to do that. So what we will do is we will film a separate video showing you how to create these in bulk and how to code that plan name with the right DAT tag so that it pulls every individual student in as a separate one when it creates those individual files. Step 6 is to check the box that you need a unique plan per student, because you want every one of these to create in an individual student file, not to create one big one for all the kids to be attached. So make sure you check that box for number 6. Once you get that in there, you'll start seeing data down here to generate for all of the students. So if you'll notice here, they did it for 109 students at one time. You can absolutely do it for very large amounts of students. Once you're finished, you hit save. It will then go through there. It will then go through there and create each of those plans for those students, and then you can go interact with those plans as needed. The next feature addition for MTSS student plans, which I think is huge, and for the districts, this means hang on, because now we at the state level are planning a meeting now that this is in here to see how we can make the SRIPs or the PST plans easier for you, because now they have added in a data domain for the MTSS intervention component, which means we can set this up as a block. So you know how when you're going into the PST or you go into the SRIP, the demographics, the assessments, the attendance, all of that stuff pulls in automatically for you? Well, now we can get intervention data to pull in automatically for you. So that means we might be able to make some adjustments, especially in the SRIP and the PST, where you might have to list interventions that you're going for, and we can just pull that in. So let us have the conversation on our side, and stay tuned from both ARI, OMI, and the MTSS crew about how we might go in and adjust those state templates to make this better for you. So this is going to be huge that we can now pull this into the plans, and y'all don't have to do that work automatically. I'm just talking about some more of what we can pull in with those plans. So stay tuned for changes to the templates. Last but not least, there are a couple of bug fixes that were done inside of the student plans. So now there is a clear or reset to student plan date forms. You know, when we first started putting the SRPs out there, some of y'all would email and said, hey, Stacy, we accidentally marked this on a kid and there's not a way to undo it, to back the data out. They're starting to put those undo buttons in some of those fields. One of them is in a calendar, where if you like put a start and end date on it and you didn't mean to, you will now see a reset or a clear option at the top of the calendars, so you can back those dates out if you needed to. Another issue that has been fixed is if you're printing from the domain tables to print all the rows of data and not only the displayed rows over here. Sometimes we saw where when people were trying to print the student plans, and yes, they are working on a more printer-friendly view of student plans altogether, so that's coming. It would only print what was showing on the screen that you saw on your computer, and sometimes it would chop off what was in the rest of that page. That has now been fixed. A couple of more features inside of there. Updating required fields with the red border when it's not populated is showing in there. So if there was something that should have been required, just to let you know that it was required instead of just throwing an error message. Yes, Lori, it should allow you to fix that date for summer school too. Any of those date fields should now be able to be corrected. Another one, enabling editing of a plan type of a single field in a plan template. That's not really something that's going to be beneficial for districts. However, for us at the state, that is huge, because if y'all remember when the original PST plan template was put out there, it was called Literacy Act when it should have been called PST. We had to get them to run a back-end script to fix that. Now, if it accidentally gets tagged to a wrong type, we can correct that manually on our side, which is great. Student plan analytics plan template filter to an overview dashboard. So we'll be able to look at the templates in a different way as we are pushing them down. They updated the student plan's copy process to maintain assigned staff and addresses against multi-district scenarios. So in our case, we did have some people who said that when they went to copy a plan and create a new one, it was not keeping all of the teachers assigned that they needed to. Now it will maintain that. This is huge right here. They added support for custom demographic and external data. So the fact that we got where we can now pull in the MTSS data, this is opening the door for us to be able to pull some of those other domains that we don't have. Like y'all have all asked, can the stuff we put on the Literacy Act page automatically feed to the student plans? Like the dyslexia information, that kind of stuff. Yes, this is what is opening the door for us to make that next step to be able to pull other domains in. So this is huge that is coming. We've got the interventions piece in there. Now they're getting that back end code put together, so we'll be able to pull the other in there. They are wholeheartedly working to make it be less entry and less clicks on everyone. And ladies and gentlemen, that's it. That is the end of all 42 pages of this inside of here. Let me throw some links into chat for you. These will be emailed out, but in case you want it, here is the actual slideshow that we just went through. After we finish this recording, it will render and we will throw it to the YouTube channel. So if you have not subscribed to the YouTube channel, let me grab the link, throw it in here as well. Now, I know a lot of people want us to send this to everyone who registered, but with over 700 people having registered, it's going to mark it as spam and like block it. So I will have to do a reply all to everyone who received the invitation to begin with this video, and they'll need to share out. Now, I will also put this in my newsletter, and like I said this morning, a newsletter will not come out next week because it's Thanksgiving and so many districts are closed, so that it'll be out the week after. But if you want the video immediately, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I will add it to this as soon as the video is rendered, which I'm hoping is by the end of the day today, and it will show up. Like I literally put a video up this morning and it shows right here under the video. So if you've not subscribed to our channel, please do so, because you'll get an email notification when things are added inside of there. But you can come here and look later today and be able to find this data immediately. I see that there are a couple of questions about when can we expect the iReady, the MClass, and all the other data in there. So let me reemphasize how that data gets into Unified Insights. Each of the vendors that you have contracted with have a window that they are told they have to give the data back to the state. Okay, that window, and I don't even know when the window is this year, but I know that not all vendors have given that data to the state. Once the data comes to the state, we have to run a validation on it. We started running, I know we got iReady data, and there was one more vendor who had sent in data, but when we started validating the data, we noticed lots of issues, especially with the iReady data, where it was not pulling everything from the ELA classes. It was only pulling and giving data to kids who were in a reading class, and we don't all use that. So we're getting iReady to make some changes and get us a new file, and we're still waiting on the other vendor's file. So here is what I would say. If you would help us help you, and email your vendors like MClass and say, hey, when are y'all sending our data to the state? Because that's what's going to get it to us so that we can get it validated and get it pushed in there. We can't do anything until we get all of the data from the vendors so that I can load it into the ODS and then push it into Unified Insights. Once we know that the data has been loaded, I will update you in the newsletter that that data has come in. And at that point, you'll need to refresh your data blocks inside of the student plans so that it will pull that new data into the SRIPs and the profile for the students. So if you would reach out to your vendors and say, hey, have y'all sent the updated data to ALSDE? That helps us get it into here faster for you. So right now I don't have an ETA because we're waiting on the vendors to send us that information. I'm gonna go ahead and stop the recording